In so doing, I wish to indicate to 1 paragraph 2 of the Constitution, the Cabinet has recommended that the National Assembly proceed. Budget 2013 provides us with the customary opportunity to renew medium-term objectives and goals, review accomplishments and outcomes of the past year, and outline plans and programs for the ensuing year. Coming as it does, however, as the second budget of this 10th Parliament of Guyana, Budget 2013 also provides us with an opportunity for reflection on and insight into the first full year of the prevailing parliamentary configuration. In the latter regard, Mr. Speaker, it might be recalled that I anticipated 1 year ago at the time of Budget 2012 that the current dispensation is fraught with formidable challenges and will test our respective resolve in this honourable House to make sound decisions that can withstand the scrutiny of time. On that occasion, I urged the prevailing of rational and meritocratic consideration, the identification of sensible practical solutions, the avoidance of short-term choices that compromise long-term imperatives, the defense of that which is fair and just, and the most steadfast adherence to serving the national interest at all times. With the benefit of 1 year of experience since, those words seem even more prescient than I would have dared to think. The past 14 months have rendered a veritable plethora of examples of parliamentary action, occasion and behest of the opposition to one-seat majority, that consumed valuable legislative time and effort in futile, unproductive, and oftentimes counterproductive pursuits. Whether it be attempts to cut essential budgetary allocations or deny an elected member the right to speak, the moving of motions or passing of bills that defy reason or collide with our Constitution, or perhaps ultimately attempts to amend the very Constitution by the slender-most of simple majorities with no attempt at consultation, much less consensus. The courts of law, the courts of public opinion, have both been condigned in their judgment. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, the past few months did also provide some, albeit rare, examples of good sense prevailing over the din of political rhetoric, a glimpse of which emerged most recently towards the end of our last sitting. One can only hope that this will increasingly be the norm going forward, that we will witness more mature and responsible deliberations, and that more productive legislative output will emerge from the considerable time we spend together here. Every sitting of this House provides us with individual and collective opportunities to make a constructive contribution to the national good, and the people of Guyana expect that we do just that. With this constantly in mind, the People's Progressive Party civic government remains firmly focused on building a better Guyana for all Guyanese, and firmly committed to working as closely as possible with all like-minded stakeholders, both within and beyond the hallowed halls of this honourable House, in pursuit of that objective. We continue to value our ongoing stakeholder engagements, and we continue to receive from these engagements important inputs into our policy-making deliberations. Mr. Speaker, I urge once again that even after the most vigorous of debates, this House learns to speak more frequently, with one voice, inspired only by that which is good for Guyana. Mr. Speaker, bolstered by our unswerving commitment to task, our government ensured the preservation of a policy environment that remained conducive to economic growth and social development throughout 2020. The result was the 7th consecutive year of real growth in our economy and associated strong macroeconomic performance, continued diversification of the productive sector, substantial progress on catalytic infrastructure projects, further strengthening of our social services, and visible improvements in our regulatory and institutional environment. Looking ahead to 2013 and beyond, our government's policy agenda continues to be aimed at building a Guyana that is truly a land of opportunity and prosperity for all. And we will remain undaunted and unfazed in our quest to realize this vision. To this end, we will continue to be guided by the 7 prerequisites outlined last year, namely a strong democracy, reliable and efficient institutions of state, long-term macroeconomic stability, economic diversification and growth, expanded physical infrastructure, high-quality social services, and environmental responsibility and sustainability. Budget 2030 reflects these priorities. Mr. Speaker, as we pursue this mission, we must be neither complacent nor mistaken of the global context in which we operate and the resultant vulnerability of our circumstances. Our economy continues to be exposed to an external environment that has been, to put it mildly, extremely unhelpful in recent years. The global economy shows very few signs of near-term dramatic improvement. We are beset by the reality of climate change and increasingly volatile extreme weather. The geography of our country and dispersion of our population combine to elevate the cost of accessing our natural resources and delivering services to our people. On their own, Mr. Speaker, these challenges immeasurably complicate the task of economic management in a country such as ours. Even as we devise a path to confront and overcome these complications of which we have limited control, it behoves us all to establish and defend the man-made and homegrown conditions that best conduce to sustained growth and development. We have an unshakable obligation to harness those factors that are more within our collective sphere of influence, and mobilize an alignment to best serve the interest of the long-term well-being and prosperity of our country. This is a responsibility that is shared and must be borne by every single one of us in this House and beyond if we are to realize our espoused aspirations. Mr. Speaker, recognizing the challenges of our time as we do, recommitting ourselves to ensure that they prove no impediments to progress, and calling on all others to join us in steady march to further develop our country, Budget 2013 is presented under the theme, Overcoming Challenges Together, Accelerating Gains for Guyana. Mr. Speaker, I will now review global economic developments. As I've just indicated, prevailing global economic conditions continue to be extremely unhelpful to small economies such as ours. Growth in global output has been persistently lethargic, with implications for both investor appetite for risk and consumer demand for our goods and services. Commodity prices continue to be unpredictable, with implications for our exporters and importers, our producers and consumers alike. As a result, sustained recovery remains elusive in the Caribbean. The global economy grew by 3.2% in 2012, driven largely by the 5.1% achieved by emerging and developing economies, compared to the much slower 1.3% in the advanced economies. Amongst the former, China continued to lead with growth of 7.8%, while growth in India slowed somewhat to 4.5%. Amongst the latter, the Euro area and the United Kingdom both recorded negative growth of 0.4% and 0.2% respectively, offset by modest growth of 2.3% and 2% in the United States and Japan, respectively. Global growth is projected to 3.5% in 2030, on the line which is 5.5% projected growth in emerging and developing economies and 1.4% in advanced economies, with the growth profile across countries much the same as in last year. In particular, the Euro area is anticipated to post a second consecutive year of contraction, reflecting lingering uncertainty with the pace of recovery and the need for greater adjustment effort in the periphery. Much of global performance will also be influenced by developments in the United States, in particular in relation to the pace of fiscal consolidation, which, if excessive, could prove harmful to US and global growth prospects. Mr. Speaker, commodity prices remain broadly stable, but continue to mirror the uncertainty of the global outlook. Oil prices peaked in March at $180 per barrel, and then declined later to end 2012 at $101 per barrel, 3% lower than at the end of 2011. The world market price for gold remained strong and increased by 6.2% to $1,669 per ounce. Aluminum prices fluctuated somewhat during the year, but ended at $2,087 per ton, 3.1% higher than the end of 2011. Prices for food commodities generally ended 2012 higher than 1 year ago, but with divergent trends across individual commodities. For example, the world market price for rice and sugar declined by 2.6% and 18% respectively, while that for wheat increased by 29.3%. Mr. Speaker, on regional developments, growth in Latin America and the Caribbean amounted to 3% in 2012 and is projected 3.6% in 2030, with Brazil projected to pick up from 1% last year to 3.5% this year. Close at home, growth in the Caribbean sub-region continued to be listless, with 1.1% in 2012 and a projection of 2% to 2030. Mr. Speaker, much like the global economy in recent years, economic performance in the sub-region has been dichotomous. Whereas the sub-region's commodity-based economies, particularly the oil and mineral exporters, generally fared well in the prevailing global climate, the service-based economies, such as the tourism-dependent ones, have lagged behind. This distinction reiterates the need for accelerated diversification in and more effective integration across all of the economies of the Caribbean. Turning to domestic macroeconomic developments, Mr. Speaker, real gross domestic product. Mr. Speaker, the performance of the Guyanese economy continues to vindicate our efforts over the years to diversify our productive base and reduce our exposure to external and other shocks. It is to our collective credit, policymakers, entrepreneurs, and households alike, that our country's overall economic performance is no longer hostage to the fortunes of 2 or 3 dominant industries. Today, new and emerging sectors are creating jobs, generating incomes, and producing value-added output, while the traditional industries maintain a significant presence in our productive landscape. Together, Mr. Speaker, they make for a more resilient economy and more persistent growth into the long term. Against this background, Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to report that real GDP grew by 4.8% in 2012. A seventh consecutive year. It is significant to note that when the sugar sector is excluded, non-sugar GDP grew by 6%, reflecting the even more rapid expansion being achieved in the rest of the economy. Sectoral performance. Mr. Speaker, the sugar industry delivered total production of 218,070 tons in 2012, a contraction of 7.8%. Industrial relations disruptions and inclement weather patterns continue to plague the industry during the first half of the year. And even though a dry weather spell aided the industry during the second crop, the first crop contraction of 33.4% could not be compensated for by the second crop growth of 13.3%. In striking contrast, The rice industry continued to exceed expectations in 2012 and recorded another year of outstanding performance. Its total production growing by 5% to 422,057 tons, the highest tonnage produced in any one year in the industry's entire history. The sustained strong performance of the industry reflects the benefits of investments made in supportive infrastructure, as well as efforts made to strengthen forward and backward industry linkages, in preparation through manufacturing and marketing. Continued favorable market prices and improved drainage and irrigation in the rice-growing areas also serve to boost production capacity and augur well for the industry's future. In non-traditional agriculture, production of other crops grew by 5.3%, benefiting from improved weather conditions in the second half of the year, coupled with easier domestic and export market access. Livestock production increased by 14.4%, driven primarily by heightened demand, especially in mining communities. The fisheries industry grew by 15.5%, with an expanded trawling fleet in operation. The forestry industry recorded a 4.3% decline, with total production of 369,645 cubic meters. The Guyana Forestry Commission is working with operators to encourage out revenues. Value-added output in the services sector increased significantly, with many industries achieving positive growth. Wholesale and retail trade grew by 6.7%, consistent with increased imports of consumption, intermediate and capital goods. Information and communication grew by 4.2%, reflecting growth in demand. Electricity and water output grew by 5.7%, transport and storage by 18.9%, finance and insurance by 13.8%, rental dwellings by 4.5%, and other services by 4%. An 11% decline was recorded in the construction sector as a result of slower than anticipated startup in some public sector construction projects, although private sector construction activity expanded. Public administration, education, and health grew by 1.4%, 2.2%, and 3.1% respectively, reflecting government's ongoing investment in the social sector. Balance of payments. Mr. Speaker, the balance of payments at the end of 2012 reflected a surplus of $12.4 million compared to a deficit of $50 million in 2011. This outturn is mainly the result of improvement in the capital account due to higher foreign direct investment. Reflecting underlying growth in production and export volumes and aided by favorable price movements, export earnings expanded by 23.6% to $1.5 billion. Export receipts from sugar grew by 7.1% to $132.1 million, primarily due to favorable contract prices, which increased by 15.1% and outweighed a 6.9% reduction in volume. Rice export receipts grew by 13.3%. $196.2 million, underlying which were 9.4% increase in volume and 3.5% increase in prices. Gold exports amounted to $716.9 million, a 38.7% increase over 2011. With the industry benefiting from a 6% favorable price movement and a 30.8% increase in export volume. Bauxite exports increased by 30.1% to $150.8 million, with volumes increasing by 22.8% to offset a 7.8% decline in export prices. Timber exports totaled $39 million, a marginal decline of 0.1%, primarily associated with lower production and efforts to further strengthen forest monitoring and enforcement within the sector. Mr. Speaker, total imports expanded by 11.7% to $2 billion, within which was an 8% increase in the value of fuel and lubricants imported. Other imports increased by 13.5%, with non-fuel intermediate goods increasing by 12.8%, capital goods by 16.1%, led by increases in imports of heavy equipment for industry, and Net payment of services amounted to $232.1 million compared to $145.4 million due to a 94.7 million increase in non-factor services, mainly as a result of higher transport and freight costs and increased payments for business services. Notwithstanding the growth in imports, the significant expansion of export earnings helped to ensure that the current account deficit widened only marginally from $372.2 million to $394.8 million. On the capital account, a surplus of $428.5 million was achieved, compared to $373.2 million in 2011. This was driven by significant growth in foreign direct investment, mainly in the mining, quarrying, and transport and communication sectors, resulting in total FDI increasing by 19% to $293.7 million in 2012. Mr. Speaker, as a result of these developments, the Bank of Guyana ended the year with total external reserves of $862.2 billion, the highest end-of-year position ever, and equivalent to 4 months of imports. Monetary developments. Mr. Speaker, in 2012, net domestic credit by the banking system expanded by 10.6% to $103.4 billion. Underlying this was continued strong growth in private sector credit by 20% to $161.5 billion at the end of 2012, with a 106.6% increase in credit to rice milling, a 51.5% increase in the mining and quarrying sector, a 28.4% increase in other manufacturing, a 26.5% increase in other services, a 70.8% increase in agriculture, a 70.2% increase in the personal sector, and a 13.6% increase in the lending for real estate category. The sustained growth in lending to the private sector, along with price and exchange rate stability observed, Mr. Speaker, on which I will report shortly, combined to confirm the appropriateness of our monetary policy stance. Prices and income inflation rate. Mr. Speaker, government expended every effort on several fronts during the year to contain inflationary pressures and protect price stability. These efforts included the excise tax adjustments to mute the pass-through of imported fuel price volatility, support to the Guyana Power and Light Link to avoid tariff increases, and continued investments towards the expansion of food production to ensure supply adequacy and price affordability. Altogether, these served to return an inflation rate of 3.5% at the end of 2012, well within acceptable norms. Remained stable throughout the year, and at the end of the year, the Guyana dollar has been traded against the US dollar at 204.5 compared to 203.75 a year ago. Our government has made it a priority to ensure that our public sector employees benefit from steady increases in their wages and salaries every year. Last year was no exception. Government granted a 5% across the board increase to all public servants and members of discipline services with effect from January 2012. A 1-month basic salary tax-free incentive was also paid in December 2012 to members of the discipline services. Furthermore, in keeping with the Memorandum of Understanding entered into between government and the Guyana Teachers Union for the years from 2011 to 2015, a 5% increase in salaries was granted to teachers in the public education system with effect from January 2012. Mr. Speaker, government continues to regard such multi-year agreements as the preferred mechanism for ensuring predictable salary increases going forward, and we will endeavor to conclude similar agreements with representatives of other public sector employees. Fiscal position, non-financial public sector. Mr. Speaker, the non-financial public sector recorded a fiscal deficit of $26 billion, or 4.5% central government. Consistent with the expansion in economic activity, central government revenue, net of GRIF inflows, grew by 7% to $129.4 billion in 2012. Tax revenue collections, which represented 91.5% of total revenue collections, again net of GRIF inflows, amounted to $118.3 billion, a 6.2% increase over 2011. Internal revenue collections increased by 2.9% to $48.6 billion in 2008% to $3.4 billion in income tax paid by self-employed persons. In contrast, Mr. Speaker, personal income tax under the PAYE system declined by 4.1% to $16.2 billion as a result of the increase in the income tax threshold granted last year. Reflecting the growth in trade already reported on, customs and trade tax collections increased by 15.7% to $12.9 billion, primarily attributed to 17.2% increase in import duties to $11.6 billion. Value-added tax and excise tax collections increased by 7.2% to $56.8 billion, with increased VAT collections from imports and domestic supplies, and increased excise tax collected on all categories of taxable goods except fuel. In the latter case, Mr. Speaker, collections declined by 27.8% to $6.6 billion as a result of the lowering of the applicable rate during the course of the year. Non-tax revenue collections recorded an increase of 16.3% to $11.1 billion, primarily on account of higher transfer profits on the Bank of Guyana. Mr. Speaker, non-interest current expenditure amounted to $108.4 billion, an increase of 17.1% over 2011. This increase was attributed to an 11% increase in wages and salaries, a 1.4% increase in other goods and services, and a 43.2% increase in transfer payments. Wages and salaries increased primarily due to the across-the-board increase granted, which I referred earlier, along with new recruitment mainly in health and education. A 43.2% increase in transfer payments was due to the operating subventions granted to GPL and GAISUCO, along with the increase granted to old age pensions. Capital expenditure increased by 12.6% to $56.4 billion, due to the advancement of several key development projects. Public enterprises. Mr. Speaker, aided by the subventions just referred to, public enterprises were able to return a surplus of $1.6 billion, compared to a deficit of $6.6 billion in 2011. In the case of GAISUCO, the subsidy supported the company meeting its operating cash flow requirements, while in GPL's case, the company was similarly helped to meet its financing requirements without implementing an increase in electricity tariffs. Mr. Speaker, both companies continue to face severe cash flow constraints. Debt management. Mr. Speaker, having expended immeasurable effort to return our country to debt sustainability, our government has been extremely judicious in striking an appropriate balance between new borrowing to finance spending development needs on the one hand, and ensuring that debt sustainability remains uncompromised on the other. At the end of 2012, Guyana's total external debt stock stood at $1.4 billion, which represented an increase of 12.7% over the previous year, largely on account of the financed component of oil shipments under the Petrocaribe arrangement with Venezuela. Total external debt service in 2012 amounted to $40.5 billion, or 6.4% more than in 2011, comprising principal repayments of $29.4 billion and interest payments of $30.1 billion. Towards the end of 2012, Guyana signed our first debt compensation agreement with Venezuela, which reduced the Petrocaribbean debt owed to that country by $100.8 million, equivalent to the value of rice and paddy shipped from December 2009 to July 2011. Government expects to conclude imminently a second debt compensation agreement which will reduce the Petrocaribbean debt to Venezuela by a further $186 million, equivalent to the value of paddy and rice shipped from July 2011 to January 2013. Also in 2012, Guyana finalized bilateral debt relief negotiations with the Russian Federation to write off 100% of the outstanding debt owed to that country, totaling $0.3 million. The relevant bilateral debt cancellation agreement was signed in January 2013. Sectoral developments and the agenda for 2013. The medium-term outlook. Mr. Speaker, as we embark on the exercise of considering the national budget for 2013, we must remind ourselves of the Guyana we are seeking to build. It is a Guyana that is modern and prosperous, whose economy is strong and resilient, whose institutions inspire confidence and provide protection, and whose citizens are motivated and accomplished. It is a Guyana that is physically integrated with its neighbors in South America and economically integrated with its neighbors in the Caribbean Sea. It is a Guyana whose comprehensive infrastructure network allows easy access to our natural resources and to move our goods and our people. It is a Guyana where all citizens have access to high-quality education, healthcare, and other social services, and where the Millennium Development Goals are met. It is Guyana whose traditional industries like sugar, rice, and bauxite can compete on the world market, just as well as whose new and emerging sectors like tourism, telecommunications, and business process outsourcing can compete. It is a Guyana where every single man, woman, and child has access to and competence in information and communication technology. It is a Guyana where investors want to bring their business and where qualified persons want to work. It is a Guyana where every young person can find rewarding, productive employment, and where every elderly person can retire with comfort. The attainment, Mr. Speaker, of such a Guyana is not beyond our grasp. On the contrary, it is well within our reach. Every program, every project, every activity, every initiative contained in Budget 2013 takes us one block closer to building this Guyana. Low carbon development strategy. Mr. Speaker, aligning responsible forest stewardship with accelerated economic development continues to be the paradigm overarching our policy framework. On this subject, Guyana's leadership and advocacy at the multilateral level continue, including within the Coalition of Rainforest Nations and more recently the Doha Conference of Parties, where Guyana was instrumental in effecting a roadmap for a REDD+ mechanism. On our visionary low-carbon development strategy, at the end of 2012, Guyana fulfilled all of the requirements for a third tranche of performance-based payments to the tune of $45 million. This brings to a total of $150 million, the amounts Guyana has earned under our partnership with Norway. This partnership, given the funds received and committed thus far, represents the second largest interim REDD+ arrangement in the world. Is testimony to our government's commitment to good forest governance and stewardship and vindicates the LCDS. Mr. Speaker, in 2012, funds began flowing from the Guyana REDD+ Investment Fund Trust Fund, the GRIF Trust Fund, as it is popularly known, to implement projects identified under the LCDS. Monies have been disbursed from the GRIF for the $7 million institutional strengthening project, which will support the Guyana Forestry Commission, the Office of Climate Change, and the Project Management Office. And for the $6 million Amerindian Development Fund project, which provides financing to support the socio-economic development of Amerindian communities and villages through the implementation of their community development plans. Mechanical harvesting has been accelerated, and there are ongoing investments in drainage works and land conversion to mechanically friendly fields. Private cane farmers have been encouraged to take on a greater share in the supply of canes to supplement rice production. Meanwhile, the issues at Skeldon, a key and critical facility for overall improvement in the industry's performance, are being addressed holistically. And several modifications and adjustments have been completed to deliver higher levels of output and efficiencies. Mr. Speaker, Gaisupo continues to grapple with the challenges of returning to its production potential and profitability. It has to recognize and confront its managerial, industrial, technical, marketing, and financial realities. Thus, an updated strategic plan for the period from 2030 to 2060 is currently being prepared. The plan will support mechanization and fuel conversion drive and focus particularly on critical areas. A strong and committed management response is necessary to deliver the anticipated output from investment. Industry customs and practices of the past must now give way to modern, innovative, and creative tools and techniques to deal with managing a complex organization in the process of change. Gaisupo will have to re-engineer its management and human relations rather. Gaisupo will have to re-engineer its management and human relations functions accordingly. Promoting a harmonious industrial relations climate is an absolute priority and will require accommodation on all sides. Management and union will need to put aside the attitudinal, non-productive confrontations in the negotiations. Industrial relations practices are expected to become more interactive and congenial. Mr. Speaker, whereas Gaisupo's lands are capable of producing in excess of 400,000 tons of sugar, field interventions to address the weather labor constraints can only be successful with the requisite agronomic input. Agricultural operations must capitalize on the relative advantages of each estate, ensure daily field supervision, and return the field to the former levels of productivity. Focus will therefore be needed in determining the right balance of mechanization, field conversion, drainage and irrigation, transport infrastructure, and plant breeding within the full spectrum of agricultural-related intervention. The factory improvement program will aim at producing sugars to meet the growing market requirements for higher quality, both in bulk and direct consumption sugars, with increased efficiencies at all 7 factories. A specific element of the plan will be to have the new packaging plant at Enmore operating at full capacity. Mr. Speaker, Gaisupo is projected to spend $3.1 billion in 2030 to advance implementation of critical recapitalization aspects of this plan. Rice. Mr. Speaker, our rice industry is well on its way to achieving and sustaining production of greater than 450,000 tons annually, while moving towards new and more premium varieties. The excellent performance of the industry in recent years is a vindication of the substantial investments made in drainage and irrigation infrastructure, coupled with the institutional capabilities accumulated in research and training for the benefit of the industry. Higher market prices have enabled financing for recapitalization in the industry. The last 3 years have witnessed over $8 billion of private capital invested by millers to upgrade their mills and improve efficiency using new and modern technologies. As a result of our government's efforts to ensure a favorable business climate, a major investment of over $4 million has been made in the first phase of our scale project in Region 9, with 120 acres already cultivated and 2,000 acres to be cultivated by the end of 2013. This Santa Fe project aims to have 10,000 acres of rice cultivated by 2050 and will expand exports in the sector with markets already identified in Brazil. Mr. Speaker, the favorable business climate put in place by government also resulted in the milling operations of one of the larger but chronic defaulting millers being acquired by a foreign investor, with the anticipated consequence that much of the problems previously experienced with untimely payment by millers to farmers should be mitigated. In the area of research, following the successful pilot cultivation of Guyana's first line of aromatic rice last year, testing will commence across the country during 2013, with the expectation that at least 20 to 25 farmers will undertake the first commercial production of this rice. This will contribute to reduced imports of several varieties of rice. Bauxite. Mr. Speaker, this government has worked hard to attract credible international investors in the local bauxite industry and to ensure they maintain their operations even in the most hostile of external conditions. At a time when bauxite plants around the world and even in our region have been closing operations, the domestic bauxite industry continued producing. In Guyana, the fortunes of two major bauxite companies continue to be mixed. Bauxine's operations continue to be supported by strong calcined bauxite prices over $400 per ton, while BCGI's operations continue to be challenged by costs that exceed prevailing market prices. Increasing production and investment are nevertheless expected to continue, with bauxite planning to expand its product mix to include the production of metallurgical bauxite, while BCGI recently completed a $20 million investment in mobile equipment. Mr. Speaker, further increases in production are projected in 2013 and beyond by both bauxite and BCGI, with continued substantial investments being made by both companies. In 2013, bauxite's projected investments continue to target increasing volume. The company will continue to operate in the Decaura and East Montgomery mines. BCGI will continue to invest in opening up its new mine at Corbuca and making its operations more efficient, with production expected to commence in 2014 in this new location. BCGI's operations continue to be less than cash positive, necessitating financial support from its parent company for continued investment and to cover operating deficits. While higher levels of production supported by these investments are expected to lower average operating costs, it is recognized that Guyana's production costs for metallurgical bauxite are generally in the higher tier due to overburden, high logistical costs, and the high price of fuel for mobile equipment, drying, and transportation operations. A third bauxite company, First Bauxite Inc., is slated to start construction of a $120 million calcined operation in late 2013 at Montseca. Government will continue to support the bauxite industry, recognizing that for each company, the cost and structure of the market prices are quite different. Gold. Mr. Speaker, the gold mining sector has been playing an increasingly important role in the domestic economy, with production reaching unprecedented levels. The growth of the industry has resulted in significant job creation and multiplied economic activity in mining communities and indeed throughout the economy. Increased investment in the sector has resulted in innovative technology being utilized, and for the first time, the local miner is engaged in hard rock mining, while more land trenches and water pumps are being utilized to effect more efficient recovery and production. The industry is also one of the principal destinations for inward FDI, with several large-scale investments in the sector. Guyana Goldfields Inc. and ETK Salisbury Resources Limited are both expected to commence commercial production by 2050. Together, these investments will generate 550 jobs during the development phases and another 400 jobs during mining operations. Other large-scale investments by Sacré-Cœur Minerals Limited and Blue Mountain Gold Corporation are underway and are anticipated to commence operations in 2040. Mr. Speaker, the demonstrated level of investor confidence and anticipated continued high price levels for gold on the world market augur extremely well for the sector. New and emerging sectors: information and communication technology. Mr. Speaker, information and communication technology, ICT, continues to be one of the principal means through which our government's agenda for modernization and transformation is being pursued. Government's commitment to the sector is driven by the recognition of how much ICT can contribute to economic diversification, creation of new and emerging job opportunities, improving competitiveness of existing and new businesses, and empowering citizens. Recognizing the abundant benefits of ICT to be accrued to the citizenry of Guyana, our government's commitment is to bring ICT access and competence within the reach of every single Guyanese person, and to promote the ICT sector as a primary employer in its own right. To this end, in keeping with our undertaking to put in place a legislative framework to facilitate and support of the realized sector, Government tabled in this Honourable House a new telecommunications bill and amendments to the Public Utilities Commission Act of 2012. We are also currently engaged in discussions with the major companies in the industry on the proposed legislative framework which, once enacted, will see transition to full competition. Also in 2012, a total of $1.9 billion was invested by government on acquiring and installing critical ICT infrastructure. Specifically, over 580 kilometers of fiber optic cable from Lefferts to Georgetown with 5 repeater stations along the route, constructing and commissioning the government data center, which is now being tested, amongst other works. 2013, over $2 billion is budgeted to advance this work, including provision for the construction of 54 LTE towers to be strategically placed in the most densely populated areas from Molson Creek to Charity, Linden, and Lethe. Once completed, Mr. Speaker, e-government services and content will be delivered to all of the major population centers. In order to ensure that the most vulnerable communities and individuals benefit from access to ICT, amounts totaling $1.6 billion was spent in 2012 under the One Laptop per Family program to procure over 38,000 laptops. This resulted in a total of 56,000 laptops being purchased under this program. To date, Mr. Speaker, 26,832 laptops have been distributed. 18,714 persons have been trained. These include 4,596 first-time computer users. In 2013, further amounts totaling $2.5 billion have been allocated to continue this program, including to purchase a further 34,000 laptops for rolling out distribution more widely. Of this total, Mr. Speaker, an amount of $500 million is earmarked for the implementation of the program in the hinterland, which will see computer banks and supporting power supplies installed in every Cameroon village. In addition, government will work closely with current and potential investors in the business process outsourcing sector to encourage and facilitate establishment and expansion of their operations, diversify their geographical spread, and promote closer alignment between basic prerequisite skills held by their potential recruits with the input requirements of this buoyant sector. The result of all these initiatives, Mr. Speaker, will be a computer-literate population, a more competent and competitive workforce, and accelerated reference density sector as a source of rapid job creation in Guyana. Oil. Mr. Speaker, petroleum exploration continued apace in 2012. Although the drilling of exploration wells offshore in prospecting areas licensed to Repsol was terminated out of caution, there were encouraging indications of petroleum. A test well was drilled by CGX to the total planned depth. The outcome was not as favorable as anticipated. The acquisition of new marine 3D seismic data by CGG Veritas within the prospecting area licensed to Esso Shell commenced in November 2012, and new petroleum prospecting licenses and their renewals were issued for further work in several locations, including the Takatu Basin, Deepwater South, Starboard Block rather, and the Currently Block. Repsol is also in pursuit of continuing activity on the block referred to as Georgetown. So transitioning to a new license and agreement were at a very advanced stage at the end of 2012. In addition to these developments, work was sustained in the Ortiz River and Grand Canal, where wharf and terminal facilities were being constructed for use in petroleum operations and logistics. In 2030, exploration operations are expected to continue with 3D seismic surveys by Esso, Repsol, and CGX. Several new licenses are expected to be issued as companies transition from dated 10-year arrangements, so that their operational focus will be maintained. Recognizing the potential for Guyana to move from exploration through discovery to production within the foreseeable future, government is actively considering the requisite policy and institutional frameworks that need to be in place. Such frameworks will include addressing environmental considerations, contract management and administration, sustainable management of oil revenues, and enhancing competitiveness in non-oil sectors in order to avoid much disease effects. Agricultural diversification. Mr. Speaker, government attaches high priority to promoting new and non-traditional agricultural products, developing infrastructure, adopting new and emerging technologies, and providing our farmers with financial and technical support.